UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
Hey.
Well, I'm going to say this to you, even though you probably don't know what it means. Happy Anzac Day.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
You don't know what Anzac Day is?
Mm-mm.
Are you getting an echo or a repeat on your line?
No. Nope, I hear you just fine.
Okay, that's weird. I'm getting one here. Maybe it's on my recorder. That's all good. So anyway, what I was saying is Anzac Day, it's like in America, it's like what Veterans Day and Memorial Day is wound in together, I suppose, if that makes some kind of sense. But in Australia, like all things, it's often an excuse to get drunk. So, but for all my Australian friends and family watching, and especially all those who've served, as my stepfather, who I think is watching, Alan, thank you for your service, and I hope you're enjoying your Anzac Day. I'm having a weird kind of tech thing going on here. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Anyway, that's all by the by. It seems to be okay now. I'm super excited about our guest tonight. He's a British filmmaker, actor, writer, and occultist. He's a founder at foolishpeople.org. Foolish People create ritual film and theatre. Harrigan wrote and directed the immersive horror film Strange Factories, which toured the oldest independent cinemas in the UK, as a live cinematic event that featured in Filmmaker magazine and Wired magazine and was written about in the Modern British Horror by Stephen Gerrard. In 2019, he was awarded Best Director at the Brighton Rocks Film Festival and Best Storyteller at the First Hermetic Film Festival in Venice for his second feature, Armageddon Gospels. In his spare time, he teaches meditation and lectures in storytelling, drama, ritual, and creativity for organisations such as the Institute of Contemporary Arts, the Royal College of Art, and the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. His third feature, LIGHTSHIPS, is currently submitting to film festivals, which is actually how I saw it when it came across my desk at Midwest Weird Fest, and I was super excited. It's such a spectacular film. Anyway, I'm delighted to welcome to the show John Harrigan.
Hey.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good, John. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me on your show. There couldn't be a more perfect show for me to come on to, really, because I am very weird. So certainly this time in the morning anyway.
It's morning there.
It's funny, we were just talking before we started recording with you about how much we're going to have to unpack tonight. Jen and I have both watched your film LIGHTSHIPS, and that alone we could talk about for 2 hours, obviously. But why don't we maybe go back to the very beginning, back to where you first became interested in the occult and all things weird?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've always been interested in it. Even when I was a child, I had a sense that there was something missing in my existence. There was one part that was that I didn't quite understand, like a missing piece of the jigsaw. And for many years, I felt like I was looking for that. And I had a big eureka moment when I was engaging with the work of Lon Milo DeCat, who's a magician. And the only way I can describe it is that it all kind of fell together at that point. So, and the thing is about the occult and anyone who's on the path of exploring this type of stuff like ritual, it's really hard to pinpoint when it began, because the more you explore it, you realize it perhaps began way back when you were young. So you begin to look at time differently as well. So for me, that was a big point when I read it. I heard an interview by Lon Milo DeCat, and something really like cracked open for me. And then I looked at my work differently, and I looked at my childhood differently, and I looked at certain indicators in my youth that are signals potentially for what I do. And in particularly my father, I lost my father quite young, and that started me on a really strange, unusual journey. I mean, the easiest way for me to describe it is, have you read The Graveyard book by Neil Gaiman?
Mm-mm.
No. So it's all about a young boy who kind of grows up in a graveyard, and for want of a better way of describing it, that was my childhood, in that my dad died, and me and my mum would spend every single weekend at the graveyard, attending to his grave and being there. And that liminal space for me at such a young age, after such a traumatic event, became a massive signifier, that graveyard. So for me, there's lots of different points it began. And in many ways, it's connecting the dots. Long Milo de Care, my work in theatre is another massive node of information and how it all connects. So yeah, that's really, really where it began. Probably that graveyard and the interview with Long Milo de Care.
And you went back to that graveyard as well later.
Yeah, I did.
As far as when you were actually involved in this fascinating ritualistic play, and when you developed a character, you, taking advantage of it is the wrong word, but you were able to utilize that relationship you had with the graveyard and the nature of the missing relationship with your father to grow something which really sounded quite magical in an interview I read with you.
Yeah. I mean, that's the same day I met my wife, who's upstairs asleep. Well, not met. That's the same time we got together that day. I went back to the graveyard. So it's another thing about that particular graveyard and how it's become this massive, massive liminal space for me, like a borderland. So yeah, we were doing a project called Dark Nights of the Soul. We were in residency at the Horse Hospital, and it was this 6-part hypersigil, spell, ritual, theatrical event. And we got to a certain part, and all our characters were merging with who we were as people. So we decided to take the character that I was inhabiting, called Dr. Bleach, who was a practitioner of magic, and I took him back to the graveyard to see what would happen and to see how he would inhabit that space. And I just remember it was suggested by other people within our group, within Foolish People, I should do this. And I was like, this is not good. This is a really bad thing to be doing. This is crossing all types of lines that I feel really uncomfortable with. That this is not respectful potentially of my father, respectful of the graveyard, respectful of my practice. So we went there and we filmed a piece of film. But having said that, and this is always the way I find it, when you're at this edge of rubbing up against what you think you are, what you're potentially capable of, what you should or shouldn't be doing, these ideas of where your morals sit within you, I found myself at my father's graveyard and thinking about what if this character grew up in a graveyard. How would he exist? How would he eat? How would he? What's the actual practicalities of something like this existing here? And certain things happened at my father's grave where I consumed flowers that were on the grave as the character, and I just felt something pop again in my head. And you could look at it both ways, either like losing access to the reality you're in, or perhaps going too far and then finding things where you were unwilling first to go. So that was, it was a really profound moment. And once the flowers went into my body and I took them into my body, it was just this very strange moment where the character and myself we went beyond together. We went somewhere else together where we just traveled on. And from that point, I knew my father in a way I'd never known him. Like I had a really deep, profound relationship with him where, I was engaging, as you said earlier when we were chatting off camera, engaging in what is hoodoo practice, reverence for the dead, but it was done through through pure experiential learning, rather than this is how you do the practice, this is what you need to do. And a large part of my work is about that. It's about experiential truth rather than the truth that's handed down to you, like saying, you've got to do it this way. This is how a hoodoo practitioner engages with the dead. For me, I'm like, well, let's find out ground zero what is the right way, through mistake, through learning, through truth, what it means for you. And that's all my ritual work has now become about, that, in that it's really based on the truth of what this potentially the spirit world is communicating to you, the sacred, and what your truth is. So it's a big subject.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that you were able to use art and ritual to transform yourself, but you also intended for the play or the play cycle we were just talking about, you intended for that to transform your audience as well, as a type of weaponized art that you described in another interview. And I also, it's funny, I was watching Lightships with Jen and we were discussing the complexity of it. And it's such a deep, fantastic film. And before I even read that interview, I was like, I think this is part of this deeper, richer, occult theatrical tradition, which goes back to, I guess, Artaud and the theatre of cruelty. And you also seen some of the cinematic work of Kenneth Anger. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you intend to use art, or how you have used art to actually transform your audience at either a subconscious or a magical level, or perhaps they're the same thing?
Yeah, that's good that you picked up on that. I always hope that people would potentially have the background to understand that, but so often they don't when they're engaging with my work. Art is magic. It's as simple as that for me. And I think where you go back far enough in evolution, there's a point in that someone in a cave started drawing on a cave wall, and that became something else. So that's the lineage I'm thinking of when I create. That was a transformational moment for our species. So for me, art has always been this vehicle of change. So I'm always looking for that for myself, my audience, my company. For every aspect is about that. And there's not any part of what I do in terms of my work where I'm thinking this is an entertainment product, or it's purely for transformation for the species, because that's what people like me have always done, hopefully. So Lightships, we had to learn how to make film. Like, we weren't a film company, we were a theatrical company, and very specific theatrical in terms of ritual that sometimes doesn't transform to film. So we had to learn how to do it and open ourselves to it. So Lightships, what you're seeing in Lightships is me responding to the work of Maryann Rada, who it's based upon the book, and about the idea of UFO contactees and how that relates to my work as a ritual practitioner. So it's this massive spider web of connections in terms of the like you talked about weaponized art. That in its simplest thing is a spell. So when you come into contact with Lightships, the idea is that whatever Marianne's dealing with as entities, potentially in her books, and I'm dealing with in my work, are creating this arena for the audience to come into when they watch it, for it to offer what they need to have, whatever it is. So it's not specific in that I'm not trying to give this is the message of Lightships, this is what you've got to take away from it. It's purely you're entering into an arena of change, and hopefully through the sacred and the divine and the numinous, you find what you need to find. And it's not for me. It's in fact, it has little to do with me at that point. It's purely for my audience to find what they need to find from it. And some people will reject it because it'd be too much and too strange and be like, I don't want any of this. Whereas other people are like, that's speaking to me in a certain way. And the good thing about that is I get a lot of credit for that. People are like, oh my God, how did you do this? And it's like nothing to do with me. It's all to do with the sacred and divine, and me just almost a ringleader, just kind of like showing the animals into the arena, and let's see how they're going to act together, what kind of show we're going to have.
That's very humble of you to say that, but I think there's something you must be doing a little more complicated than that, because in that final act and towards the denouement of the movie, the camera work and the movement of the actors and the color, and when that camera's spinning and when reality seems to blur more at the end. And of course, there's, dialogue going on as well. There was something which, and I'm not somebody who's, a kumbaya person who's affected by things like that. I'm really not. But that felt like it changed whatever brain state I was in. Like it was almost hypnotic. I was very conscious. In fact, at first I wasn't conscious, but I felt myself almost slipping into another state. And I had to watch it again. I had to watch it 3 times actually, because I was fading away into like something was happening. I wanted to watch it consciously as well as unconsciously. So it seemed like through camera technique and through other things, you were actually able to almost get a direct line into the unconscious, or that's what it felt like to me anyway.
That makes me very happy. So thank you for sharing that. That's really good to hear that. And this is such an interesting subject in that, how much I'd like to be, I really like to take credit and say like, I did that specifically there so that and that there, so I could create this so that you'd have a different change of brain state, but I'd be lying. So I can't. I think it comes from the people. If you're creating art and you're in a different brain state, if the work is changing you in the way that you hope it changed the audience, and you're coming at it from a really authentic place in that you really believe in what you're doing and you want to offer someone that in a really humble way, you're protected by the things you're engaging with and they work through you. So whatever you want to, yes, of course it takes skill and knowledge and expertise and all those things. And I'd be lying because I wouldn't be fair to my collaborators because, people like Mark Caldwell, who was the cinematographer, all the incredible performers. But the way I engage in rehearsal and the ritualization of it, that's the key where it's not just simply, for example, just the landscape where we shot the film. I had a relationship with that building and it was a good and bad relationship. And I knew its history and I knew the people that lived there and I knew what had been done there. And so I'm engaging at that level where even when I go into a space, I meet the space, I talk to the space, I ask permission to be there, I deal with what's going on there, and then I follow the path as honestly as I can. And it's an ever-changing thing. So it can change in any moment where the information I'm getting from the place, the people I'm working with, the story, will ritualize it and change how it needs to change. And that comes from my gut instinct, my will and my truth and what I work with. And I think from following that 100% to the point of ridiculousness, where you just listen to that on what your brain is telling you, what you've got your monkey brain saying, you've got to do it this way, it needs to be done that way. And you're like constantly rejecting that. Same as I was rejecting it in the graveyard when I was like, okay, let's eat those flowers. This is potentially desecrating my father's grave, but that's what I'm being told I need to do. So I'm going to do that. And I think when you throw off the norms of what society places on you and you work in such a way where you have a completely pure, hopefully pure relationship with your creativity, your truth, what you want for the audience, then these amazing things happen where you are able to foster situations where people have more than a normal experience, a numinous experience. But it's very difficult. It's so subtle. It's such a subtle thing to be engaged in. Too much, you dispel it. Too little, you dispel it. It's just almost like dancing this effortless line of the divine and the profane. I know that doesn't answer your question at all, really, but
it doesn't. It leads into another one, or some of it does. Yeah. It seems that and it's something I never thought of before. I guess I've never made any ritual art myself, but the locations that you choose seem to be a big part of achieving that state or achieving that art or that transformation that you want to. As well, you mentioned then that you knew the building in LIGHTSHIPS, or you knew its history. And I know when you were doing Dark Nights at the Horse Hospital, which fascinated me because I actually curated a film program for the Horse Hospital back in
really? That's amazing.
A short horror program when I used to run a horror
that's so cool.
in Sydney. But you said that space was a very special place as well because there'd been genuine horse surgery. The Horse Hospital was called the Horse Hospital because it used to be a horse hospital. So is that something that whenever you go into an artistic ritual piece, you're very conscious of ensuring that the space is right?
Without a doubt. I've been thinking about this recently again, in that I can't tell stories unless I have a landscape first. It's like that comes first to me. The landscape is almost like the paper or the book or the it's the form. It's the form, the receptacle of the story for me. So for me, the horse hospital was being offered, and it was the horse. And so I began to look at the history of the horse and thinking about that, and that this animal has taken our species again. Looking back to the dawn of time, there was a certain point we started using horses, and that changed everything. It changed culture. It changed how we were able to move through landscapes. And it was looking at that, even at that fundamental level, like, what does the horse mean to us? How have we treated it? Have we treated it well? Have we not treated it well? What kind of relationship would you have with this karmic idea of the horse? How does that change the story I'm telling? So that's how I tend to think. And then, like, all this blood has been spilt on this floor in this building, and that makes it sacred for me as a ritual artist, and so on. It's quite common sense stuff, even though it's quite far out. It's like, where are we? What's here? What has been here? What does that mean to the story? What does it mean to me? It's asking lots of questions and waiting for honest answers to come, rather than informing, like saying it has to be this. I never do that. I never like this has to be what it needs, what I want it to be. It's like, what does it want me to do? That's where I come from. Like, what do you need from me? How can we collaborate?
I suspect that there might have been a similar process in your collaboration with Maryann Rada, the UFO contactee, whose writings form the basis of some of the themes and the dialogue and the writing within LIGHTSHIPS. Could you talk a little bit about how you met Marianne and how you came to...
I mean, that was beautifully synchronous, again, like a massive synchronous event, in that it was actually through an actress called Lois Temmel, who appears in the film, who knew of my work for a long time, through various friends, through shared connections. And we were headlining the theatre lineup at Byline Festival, and I'd created a piece called the Lying Field. And it was all about this, because the Byline Festival was about fake news and about how reporters should report the truth rather than fake stuff. And so I created a story based around what is it about us as a species that we need to create this spectacle of lies? What is? I looked at that, and I created a piece where the audience would come into it and they'd meet this showman, and he was potentially telling them they were going to be taken away by UFOs. So it was all about a UFO abduction, almost like a cult leader, but a showman. And so the audience come into that and they're like, "Wow, when's the UFO coming?" And he has a big flight of stairs. So Lois came to see this, and I didn't even know that she was going to be asking me to potentially direct a show about a film about UFOs and UFO contactees. So she was straight away freaked out. She was like, "Oh my God," because she had no idea this thing I was doing was all about UFOs. And so we talked after, and she was like, you have to meet Marianne. You have to speak to Bill, who's the producer. And I was like, okay. And I checked in with myself, and my instincts and the things I rely on were saying, yes, investigate this. I did. And then I looked and I was like, nope, not right for me at all. And that was my brain thinking. I was like, I just don't feel this is the right arena for FP, for to look at the concept of what a Palladian is. Because how it is a cultural artifact, it seems to be very informed. It's like, this is what it is. This is how they look. This is, and that put me off straight away. I hate things telling me how things need to be. But I read the book and I was like, okay, no, that's not what it is. There's truth. Marianne is accessing truth, because it's the same truth I'd met. As soon as I read her book, I was like, okay, that's true. I know that's true. I felt that myself. And I was like, yeah, I can work with her. She's not bullshitting anyone. She's getting something from somewhere that's not this place. Because I recognize it. I can feel the same, the effect you described when you watch LIGHTSHIPS, that brain change thing. Reading her book gave me that same brain change. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? Something more interesting. So I flew out to meet her, to see all her journal, to talk about her experiences. And as I said to you earlier, only way I can describe it with is, you talk to her for 10 minutes and she's such a force. She's like, she's giving all this energy to you, all this energy. And you're like, I feel like I'm going to pass out from being in your presence. What's that about? Why do I feel dizzy? I feel like I've done drugs or mushrooms just talking to you. Why is that? So she's accessing something non-ordinary. And you find this, you do this long enough. I mean, it's 30 years. You look for these signs of like, whoa, that's really weird. That's in my body, in my biology. there's something really going on, and we can talk more about that. But what I found is that I think the Palladians, or for me, what they are, this is really just my perspective, because obviously Marianne would disagree, were potentially, I'd met them before. That's the thing, I met these same entities, and I recognize them as Enochian angels. And it's funny how Marianne talks about this idea of the Palladians are at a different dimensional level, and the Enochian angels are at a different dimensional level. When you look at Dee's scrying mirror, you look at his plate to bring them into this reality, it's like a 7-dimensional atrium for them to exist within. And it all kind of, okay, I've met these things, I know I've got a relationship with them already, so that was fascinating.
The Dee and Kelly scrying stuff always was something I was fascinated as a teen. So when I did my first adult trip, when I was, I think, about 18 to the UK, I had to go to the British Museum to see. They had some of the scrying stones. But anyway, that's just a little aside. What fascinates me with your call then that they're Enochian angels is actually something I've long suspected myself, and I'm not sure if it's ever been recorded anywhere in the UFO literature. But Billy Meyer, who might be the most famous contactee with the Palladians, his main point of contact was with this beautiful blonde, typical Nordic female Palladian called Semjazi or Semjazi. I'm probably mispronouncing it. But the main antagonist angel in the Book of Enoch is also called Semjazi.
That's just fantastic, isn't it?
So
when you get those hits.
To me, that says that perhaps all extraterrestrial contact, or at least that type of extraterrestrial contact, might be far more complicated than just people from a beam ship from another solar system. It might be, as you suggested, and you've actually said you've had experience with these entities. It seems to me, and it always has been the suspicion at the back of my mind since I read that and realized the connection with the Book of Enoch, the Billy Meyer stuff. I thought maybe these things are who in Enoch came down and interfered with us or guided us, or depending what your interpretation is, they certainly had a relationship with humanity from way back in Genesis times, that somehow these things are still interconnecting with us today.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing about what these things are is that I think, from my experience and my work, potentially, that, as I said to you earlier, as I go further, I feel like I know less, that they take on the form that you need them to take on. So if you're looking for angels, you'll find an angel. If you're looking for Palladians, you'll find a Palladian. If you're looking for fairies, potentially you'll find a fairy. If you're looking, whatever you need to find, it can inhabit that form for your consciousness. I'm not saying all the time, but I think a lot of the time, I think that we are able to, and I need to get into quantum physics now, but what we put our focus on changes the thing of focus. So that is a fascinating idea, the concept of our imagination, our creativity, and our mind. If we look hard at something and believe it enough, we can change how it interacts with us. So for me, it seems to be that. I'm not saying that it's all our imagination, or because the thing that I met with through Marianne, yes, I've dealt with Enochian angels. That was my first play was Language of Angels, about the Enochian language. So it was a massive hit for me in terms of this, seeing that connection with Marianne. But I had one dream where I felt like I met what she describes as Palladians, where it was before I even knew about Marianne even existed. I woke up, I had the dream, and I was somewhere else, and they were like, "Oh, hi, are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine. How are you doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, don't worry about death." And I was like, "What? Just don't worry about death. It's not even a thing." And it was like, and I was like, "Okay, thanks for that. That's a really random thing to say." And they're like, "Yep, see you later." And I was like, "Thank you, bye-bye." And I woke up, I was like, wow, that was the weirdest dream. It's like someone not just literally opened the door in my consciousness. It was like, "Hey, don't worry about death." And the only way I could describe it was, I'm not saying I was particularly worried about death before, but I was like, I'm just not frightened of death anymore because they just told me not to be. And that was really a really odd dream. And when I met Marianne and when I read the book, I was like, that's the same things that she's dealing with. That's the only time I've had contact in that manner, in the way that, Marianne has dreams. She uses channeling. She does divination. But I just, something in me, I was like, that's this exact same form that they're taking for her. I felt really strongly, and I could like literally connect that thread between her work and my work. And I was like, okay, well, I have to do this. I'm being called to do this work for her.
I think that idea that you hinted on then, that the imagination intersects with the other, is the key to a lot of the supernatural or the paranormal. And I think we live in a time where the imagination, or the phrase "it's all in your imagination" or "you're just imagining things" is so dismissive, but there's a much older and longer esoteric strain throughout the Western occult tradition, and also the romantic tradition, meaning the romantic poets, which people like Henry Corbin talk about and Patrick Harper talk about, that there's an imaginal realm which isn't just something. It's funny, my house just started creaking and knocking. That's like an exteriorization, as you would say. There's something far more complicated with the way that we interact with the imaginal than it just all being in our heads. Now, I do think it presents to us the way that we anticipate or want or expect it to. And I think it goes even beyond angels and Pleiadians and fairies. I suspect everything from Bigfoot to the ghost of the great-grandmother in the haunted family estate are all somehow part of this.
Completely agree.
This
completely
other source.
Agree. And that then you look at, when you know that, everything, all the walls fall away. Because if it's all connected in the way you describe, and 100% that's my experience, and that's not just what I think it is. When I've gone out and dealt with these things, that's how it's manifested for me. In the creativity I bring to it, or the mind space I'm in, changes what happens. And then I've done that enough over 30 years to see the occurrences again and again and again. And one particular point where I had real confirmed access to that was a UFO experience, in that we were working on, I think it was Dark Nights, and it was Lilith, the concept of what Lilith was. And I was in my hometown, and I was engaging with that idea, and I was almost having a conversation creatively in my head with the idea of what this Lilith is. And I can't remember the exact words, but I was like, okay, well, just prove to me then. Do something to prove to me that this is real, because I'm in a space where I could be going mad, or I could be in a creative, fugue where something's exciting happened. And I happened to look up, and then I saw this red UFO light, distant, like go jish, 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 and zip off. I was like, wow, that's very practical, and like that's there and then instantly. Now, was that my mind? Did I make that happen? Or was it real and I got lucky? I have no way of knowing that. But I think the whole realm of the paranormal, the sacred, is that level of a vision, a sighting. They're all in this nebulous space where the moment you try to pin it down, it will reject you trying to pin it down. I think the problem that most people have is they try to inform their experience. They're like, this is what it was. You have to believe me. And the moment you do that, it goes, no, screw you. You can't pin me down. I won't be pinned down. So and I've learned to be really respectful of it, not wanting to be pinned down, because I've tried to pin it down. It's not like I haven't tried. I've really tried to pin it down. And it is, every time I do that, it fucks with me. For one of we're like, technology breaks, relationship breaks, I break, everything breaks. The moment you're like, yeah, no, I'm a magician, or I'm an artist, it must be this way. I've learned to be humble. It's not that I particularly was humble in the beginning. It's been beaten out of me, this kind of idea of like, I'm in control. I'm not in control. Luckily I'm riding the horse, and hopefully I won't be crushed by the horse, and we'll get to where we're going together. And I think when you come at it with that energy, you tend to be safe, hopefully. But having said that, not always. You're not always safe. Madness is always one step away.
Can you tell us some experience you might have had where it has slapped you down, or where you have been, knocked back?
I can tell you some really, when I've been most frightened, like, actually, you might even know of their work. Have you know of Richard Freeman and the Centre for Tea and Zoology in the UK, CFZ? So they go all over the world looking for monsters and around Pendak and Yetis. And I was good friends with Richard, and he appeared in Dark Nights of the Soul. And we went to this haunted church, and this is another idea of how your mind affects reality. And he was telling me this terrifying story, like he'd heard this story about this triangle head being, and it really hit like a fear point for me. I was like, this is just the most awful, terrifying story. And from this story, he got me into this fear state.
Mhm.
And at the moment I entered that fear state, again, I felt that chemical brain change thing going on. And I happened to look up, it was middle of the night, we're at this investigating this kind of disused church near to where I live, called Clop Hill, and you can research the history. I looked up and I just saw a ghost just move across, like really in the space with me. And I was like, okay, either I've gone mad, either Richard did that to me, or I've just luckily happened to look up at the right time and seen a ghost. Which all those three things, maybe it's all of them. Maybe I am mad. Maybe there is a ghost there. Maybe Richard did get me in the right state, and so that was a terrifying moment. The other moment was I worked on something called Ruined Steel, which was about technology and about the worst facets of technology. And some of this I can't even talk about because and this sounds really crazy, I've had to sign the Official Secrets Act around this particular one in the UK. And this company I was researching, and it was all about creating a human being and to download the soul into into this like clone, a robot, whatever way you want to look at it. And it was all about the most nefarious aspects of technology. And then I put out a call to have photos done by the lead actress, who was this famous burlesque model. And I got an email from a guy, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it for free. I've got all the best equipment. I've got the best locations to have these photos done. And I went and met him, and he gave me his card. And I looked at the card, and I was like, oh, I recognize that company. And he was director of maritime divisions. And I went home and looked at the company, and the company was the same, like literally the real world version of the company that I was writing about. And I was so beyond freaked out. I was like, no. Because the company was a terrifying company. Like I'm talking like involved in all the things that you don't want to get involved in, with all the type of people that you don't want to get on their radar. And because I was freaked out because the play was really negative about that type of company and about what it was about. It was called Ruined Steel. The company was called Ruined Steel, and it's about how they control humanity and the concepts. And so the real world company had entered my arena and wanted to engage with this story. So I had this moment of pure fear, like proper paranoid freak out. Like, did they know I was doing it? Have they got in contact with me because I've done the play? How did this happen? I got my equilibrium. I went forward with it, and the guy was like, "Right, you have to. We're going to go and do this shoot for this model, for free. But you have to. We're going to go to a secret base." But we have, so to do the shoot on this secret base, you have to have a full background check. So I had to give him my passport to do a full background check on me before I even got on the base. So I went onto this secret base with him and a burlesque model and did all this photo shoot. But I was so freaked out. I can't even tell you. I was like, I don't want to even be on the radar of these people. Do you know what I mean? And we did the photo shoot, and he was an okay guy. But the company that he was involved in was so, I won't say them because it would blip up, but it was terrifying. And that happens to me a lot. But I've got, as the years have gone on, I've got better at dealing with the freak out aspect. Like I've got my equilibrium. I know that it's part of the journey and I'm doing something right. If that type of thing's happening, that, you get those gifts where you're, accessing the other, and then these people come onto the stage who need to come onto the stage to engage with the story. So that was a big one though. And the burlesque model, after we left the base, she was like she was in a weird place, and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, and she did drugs on this base. She went to the toilet and she told me after, she's like, yeah, I did some coke in there. I was like, what, are you mad? We're in like a weird secret base. You can't be doing drugs in their toilet. What are you doing? So but she was there naked, having all these incredible pictures done because she was the robot creature in the play, Ruined Steel. And that was quite a freaky one. That was a full-on one.
I often think reality, and this is just I suppose an allegory to look at it, but I often think of reality as like a grid, And most of the time, most people are somehow in the empty spaces between the vertical and horizontal interconnecting lines. But sometimes I know in my life, I feel like I have a string of synchronicities or a string of coincidences or a string of weird big things happening. And then to me, it feels like I'm traveling on one of those interconnecting lines, and then I might fall off back into the middle of a space between the interconnecting lines of the grid. But I suspect somebody who's an ongoing ritual magician or an occult practitioner, by what you do, it must tend to push you onto those lines rather than on the space in between. So I'm guessing you feel like your life probably has far more synchronicities and far more weird events than if you perhaps weren't engaging in the type of practices that you engage in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. The difficult thing for me is the longer I do this, because I do live in like a little village and my kids do go to a normal school and I have neighbors, is that the mundane is more of a dangerous thing for me. The mundanity of the world, because almost it's counter to the wondrous and the beauty. A lot of the time it's about banishing that. And there's a reason that people like me used to live in the middle of a wood away from everyone else. Yeah. Because I've become almost an amplifier for it. So weird shit happens when I'm around just because it's got on my body. I've been doing this so long. So I tend to, it tends to affect relationships and how things happen. So often I find myself thinking I'd rather be in the middle of one of those spaces you described, like on the edge, a liminal space. That's my comfort zone, the liminal. So I could literally go and live in a graveyard and be happier than in a normal 2 up, 2 down. The difficulty for me is how I engage with the real world, because I've gone so far out to the nether regions of the weird I've made a home there spiritually and with the sacred. And back in the day, like we said at the beginning, people like me would have a framework for that. We'd be at the edge of the village or in the wood or just away from society so that we could administer to the society to help. And I'm not much help when I'm embedded in the mundane, for want of a better word. That shuts down all my skills, all my my connection. So it's a really weird, it's a very strange thing, dancing that line of having a normal life, not freaking people out, like meeting them, because I could quite easily scare people. I can switch that on quite quickly where they're like, they can sense my weirdness. They're like, whoa, get away from me. You got stuff all over you, some weird psychic stuff. So luckily, but having said that, my practice, for however it happened, I teach meditation locally at Hitchin Avenue, this incredible landscape. I have a relationship with that. And I have got my space. And when I'm doing that, I'm happy. Do you know what I mean? Like it works quite well. It's a different facet of my work, but it's a very pure facet in that it's just me administering to the liminal to other people who need access to it. So, other humans who have got too immersed in to have lost their access to the truth and need help kind of navigating back to the essence of what they are. I can do that very quickly because of what I've done through my work. And yeah, it's a dance. It's a real dance. It's like you described. It's like that space is key. It's like that liminal space is where I'm happiest. And I guess I get like a fish out of water if I'm too long away from that.
Now, Jen's not a practicing magician or an occultist, but she is a sensitive and a paranormal investigator. I'm just wondering, do you feel that when you're investigating more, Jen, or when you're more involved? Because I know you used to do readings as well. Do you feel the more immersed in it, the more you attract these kind of different energies, or the stranger your life becomes?
Yeah, I've always tried to stay away from it, especially since I've got kids. I know when I open myself up more, it's a lot. Yeah. So I'm kind of like in between. I can't decide if I just want to completely block it off or welcome it. So
yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. What Jen just described, 100% that. And I get that. Like you do have to, because I have kids, so you have to protect them. And it's a big question, like how much you invite it in and how you balance it. And I've invited it fully in. So it's a real dance in managing that aspect and not letting it, because this reason is people engage in this work go mad, because it's designed to remove all these different borders to your mind so you can have these experiences. So you have to be a certain person to survive in that arena. So I get why why people do want it at arm's length. But having said that, as I guess you guys know more than anyone, it has its place in our life in a really important way. And I think we've lost mostly what we're experiencing now is this massive influx of the strange, because we've kept it at arm's bay for so long with things like the Industrial Revolution, and we're answering for that now in that we've entered the underworld collectively as a species, and we're being forced to engage with it. You know, like look at lockdown. I mean, this is the biggest ritual the globe has ever been through collectively, as far as I'm concerned. It's all the aspects of what a ritual is.
Do you think there's something, I don't normally talk politics or conspiracy on the show, although I'm fascinated with both, but do you think there is something intentionally ritualistic about the mask wearing? Because there seems to be to me.
You know what, how I operate is that, yes, I think, I answer your question simply, I do think it's obviously definitely ritualistic, like locking your mouth down, but I wouldn't say it's intentional, you know, and the reason I wouldn't say it's intentional because I can't prove it. So I'm very loath to say. I see a lot of other people. I love conspiracy too, and where I come at from conspiracy, if I can't verify it from my own experience, if I can't meet someone who's saying on a secret base saying, "Oh yeah, we're doing that for thingamabob," then I don't believe it until it's proven in my experience. So I'm like, well, it could be or it could not be. There's no way we can prove it. So, but looking at it, it's a physical reaction, not being able to go out. Well, this the simple thing of not being able to show your expression to someone. Yeah, you know, like that when you're in a place and they don't know if you're smiling. Like I had an experience, I was in a supermarket and I had my mask on and I accidentally got too close to someone and we looked at each other and neither of us knew what the dynamic was emotionally. So that is a ritualistic thing. Like you're in ritual. I spend large part of my work is blindfold and changing your sensory perception. So yes, 100% it's ritualistic, but whether it's intentional and done as this idea of global reset and all that kind of thing, there's no way we can improve it. So it's more interesting to talk about how is it affecting us personally, individually, I think, than going too far down the road and saying, why are people doing this to us? What does it mean to us? So for example, this is a really interesting area, like the whole idea of the vaccination. I got my vaccination last week, but I had a massive dialogue with myself about that. Like, should I do it? Because it generally wholesale and believe if you're healthy and well, I'm okay just engaging with the world and trying to keep myself healthy. But I would never rush to any kind of doctor for anything unless I really, really needed it. That's just how I engage with the world. Yes. And it's not anything about, I don't believe in medicine. It's just, I think that's a healthy way to be. So the idea of having a vaccination, and again, I'm not a vaccination denier. I'm not a denier. I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. It's a really difficult subject for me. And I had it done because I wanted to protect my kids because I couldn't verify that it wasn't what people are saying. Do you know what I mean? So I go on really common sense stuff with my work, even though I work out in the outer reaches of oddness. I'm really a practical, common sense person because I have to be, else I'd just drift off into the ether and never come back. Do you know what I mean? So you could think it's a conspiracy theory, but madness that way lies.
There is a sense of madness, as you were mentioning before, with how people almost have to cross a line to connect with the other. Like, there's a tradition, of course, in shamanism where was the person crazy or were they, actually engaged with the gods? Or today when somebody's schizophrenic and they're hearing voices, there's still, to me at least, that question, is there something sometimes external to them speaking to them? But to get back to LIGHTSHIPS, which we probably should talk about a little bit more, that's clearly a big theme in that film, the idea of where does insanity stop and where does genuine experience and something else begin? So that's something that obviously you're conscious of in your work as well, I'm assuming. I'm like the Sacred Fall is the name of my company, is Foolish People. So the idea that you have to step off the cliff to have that journey, the hero's journey. You have to go out of the village into the wilderness to go mad, to come back with your piece of truth. So, and, I think that, again, we talked about a balancing state is like, how much is too much? And where is the balance in it? I think that everyone in their life now with this great thing that's happening to us is experiencing
a forced insanity. You know, we've had everything taken away from us that we value, that we thought we valued. So we're getting to see what is the truth of who we are. You know, we're locked down into our homes. We've like built these homes and we're locked into them. It's a really interesting moment for me. I'm seeing loads of people who you wouldn't have conversations around odd things that we talk about here on this interview, being forced to have those conversations. And it's like how much they reject it is quite interesting. I know so many people are like, no, you know, which are still rejecting the general strangeness of this moment. Like even just around the thing of like where the virus come from. I mean, no one really knows. We don't understand. And people are like, oh yes, it's definitely, you know, it's definitely that way or that way. No one fucking has a clue what's going on right now, really. And I'm quite okay with that because I often don't have a clue what's going on. It's my landscape. Liminal is a landscape of the unknown, and getting right with that in your mind and your essence. So I'm fine with that landscape. Everyone else is like trying to inform, like, oh no, we're okay. This is real. This is this is that. And really, we need to let go of all that and just see with a different pair of eyes, like what's happening to us practically. I see, even in my sphere, my relationships, I'm seeing everyone at the edge being forced to deal with their trauma, being forced to deal with who they are, why they're here, all these massive questions that is every human should have to deal with anyway, and do have to deal with at the end of your days. You're going to have to deal with that stuff anyway when you're about to die. I've been around people that are about to pass, and everyone has that reckoning. So I'd rather do it now, because you don't want to be dying and having a reckoning. Best just to have dealt with all that shit before. So it's just such a fascinating time. It's a very dangerous time, I think. You know, like the idea of like light ships all being like the character of Eve, forced into an environment where everyone is out there. It's so easy to be drowned by people who are out there. Do you know what I mean? People dealing with their stuff psychically, spiritually, you know, just the physical thing of dealing with that. That's a very dangerous time. So we're in a dangerous time where, as we're seeing, everything's unhinged. It can go from 0 to 60 in a moment, just like that. So yeah, it's a fascinating, dangerous time.
Yeah. Again, back to that interview I read with you in the Occult magazine. And I think that was from back in like, what was it, like 96 or 97?
Something like that, yeah.
So it's a while ago, but it's interesting now because we live in this realm of where people, I think, acknowledge that the media is far less trustworthy than probably most people acknowledged back then. But even in that, you were talking about how your art in many ways was a response to the weaponization of the media and the weaponization of the culture then. Yeah. So do you feel your art today remains as you did, almost, that's quite some time ago. That's, how long ago is that? Yeah, well, back in
That's such a great question. That's such a great question.
Back. Do you still feel like today you're pushing back against that kind of main culture with LIGHTSHIPS?
To be honest with you, I felt like, you know, my company was always about offering people this experience we're having, where people have to have a reckoning with how we're behaving towards the planet, towards each other, towards ourselves. And it happened through this pandemic. The pandemic did what I've been trying to do for so long in my work, and maybe other things happened to cause it to happen. So I had this experience where, like, okay, well, what does my company mean now? This moment has happened where we're like, whatever you want to call it, this great reset, whether someone's doing it or it's happening, we have to deal with something here. We're in the underworld. I always knew we'd have to go into the underworld to deal with this stuff. So for me, it's been like a moment like, oh, what's done? I don't need to do it anymore. There's nothing left for me to do, because we're in this Chalkle Perilous. We're in Chalkle Perilous. So who am I now? What does that mean to someone do I just wander off into the wilderness and I can just have a quiet life? Or, and I'm not sure I've answered that yet. Because I don't know. I'm still in the underworld as well with everyone else. So it's what I'm going through now is actually I'm not retraining. I'm doing the work myself as well. I've got lots of work I need to do. You know what I mean? Like, to do what I do as a ritualist, I've made lots of decisions, good and bad, karmically for myself, and I'm dealing with the effect of what I've done. You know, like for myself personally, I think that any magician or religious person who says, I've got all the answers, this is the way it is, I'm illuminated, they are so full of shit. Because anyone, even if they're in Shangri-La and they're saying, come, my son, I'm going to tell you, that's just utter lies, because the further you go down the path, the less you know, I think, and the more work you have to do. Do you know what I mean? The more work to be done. So for me, it's a time of, I've been looking at doing a wilderness vigil. I couldn't get it done this year, which is when you go into the wilderness, you sit down and you just do nothing for 4 days and don't eat anything and just drink water and see what happens. I felt it was really important for me this year, turning 50. I couldn't make that happen. I'm doing something else with someone called Dr. Martin Shaw, who's an incredible wilderness rites person. And he does lots of writing, poetic writing, and he's also a storyteller. I'm hopefully going away in June to do something. So for me, it's about, whereas I've been responsible for my group and for doing the work, I'm now offering over my own period of learning and doing the work myself.
I have one final question for John, but I don't know if I've almost taken the whole interview, so I'm wondering if Jen has a question before I take the end of it.
Oh, I'm really curious about your meditation. Like, when did you get involved in that?
That was about, maybe, was it 4? I've trained in transcendental meditation, so I've done the traditional route. But really, because of what I do, because of my practice, is that liminal state is the meditative state. Mm-hmm. It's just accessing it a different way. I can quite easily take people into that state because I've spent so much of my life trying to get there. So I do full moon meditation workshops, which is really me creating a space with the landscape, with the moon, and just a group of people to meet what they need to meet and deal with what they've got to deal with. So I teach that locally. I use a lot of mantra. It's really, it took me a long time to accept that role as a meditation teacher. I was like, I'm not a meditation teacher. I'm doing far stranger stuff. And the universe was like, no, you are. You need to just go over there in that field and help people and shut up. Mm-hmm. And when I finally did it, it was I was like, oh my God, it's so simple. Just me, a field, a group of humans. It's so simple. I don't have to do like a massive ritual with a festival and bring people in. So often we overcomplicate things. Mm-hmm. And so often, if you want to meet the strange, just stop for 5 minutes and listen to what's happening in your body, in your mind. So that's how I came to be a meditation teacher. I find myself laughing when I'm in the field with a group of people, and I'm like, I can't believe this is what the universe, and it's like 2 minutes away from my door as well. And I was like, this is so strange.
The universe is strange. And that leads me to my final question, which is a bit of a personal question, I guess. I suspect from you mentioning before, you alluded to Chapel Perilous, which I know from the Illuminatus trilogy, and in Lightships, there's a reference to the Black Iron Prison from P.K. Dick's Valis, and there's also a reference to Baudrillard's work with the simulacrum and simulation, which obviously was very formative on the Matrix films. So I wonder, do you think that sometimes the reality we live in might just be BS and we're all being tricked to a degree and it's something else?
Yeah, I increasingly so. I'm not sure we're in a computer simulation, but I do think that we just come here to do something and then we go back home after. I think it links with that dream I had, and that's what increasingly I'm feeling like. This is like you said, it's just BS. It's just we're coming here to learn, to learn stuff. It's like in True Detective, where he talks about time is where you grow things to have experience. And the nihilistic way of looking at it is like Thomas Ligotti and his work with this idea the universe is uncaring and doesn't give a toss about us, and we're just here to experience pain and suffering. And I think that's it. But the irony is that pain and suffering of the human journey is to teach us and to work things out before we go back to where we come from, which is like Marianne talks about a different dimension, higher dimensions. That's my experiences with reality seems to be, why is it so nebulous? If it was so set, then I'm not sure we are in a black iron prison. I love the idea of what P.K. Dick says. Do you know what I mean? Valis. That's why I think another way connected with Marianne's work so well, because I see them very, very much in a similar area. So yes is a simple answer, but I have no idea what or how or why, you know. And it's just very interesting. I mean, what do you think that, you guys? I mean, does it feel strange and like that for you?
Sometimes, yeah. I
sometimes.
A lot of things are tricking us. There's a lot of deceit, you know, to what the nature of reality really is, however you want to look at that.
Cosmic Joker, the idea of the cosmic Joker is a fascinating thing in terms of like, it just, like you said, it fucks with you and just plays these synchronous games. And the moment you further you go down, it's like, pulls the rug. And you're like, okay, I'm going to keep you at arm's length, like Jen said, because you're just trying to send me mad.
Yeah. Yeah. Lately, I've been getting the numbers. That seems to be a popular thing lately. 1111, or I don't really understand what all that's supposed to mean, but a lot of people say it's angelic or.
Yeah, I get 1111 a lot. You know what I found it helps though? Talking about what helps with that stuff is that what I've done, I did I'm sorry to go overlap a bit. I did a 101 day ritual where I kind of engage with this stuff. Okay. And now I every morning, I don't meditate, but I pray every morning. I have a real formulaic way of dealing with it. So like we're talking about, so you don't drift off, you have to have the practicalities. Like I just get on my knees and I pray and light a candle, and that structure helps this idea of the other. The other then comes in. It's like, okay, you've created a space for me. I'm not going to come in and smash your house up. I know you respect what I am, and that's cool. We're good. And through that, it's been really beneficial. That simple act, because I'm very freeform. I'm like a jazz musician in terms of like the other. So, but being practical and sitting down and going in the morning every day, that's really sorted me out. So that's been a good tip.
See, my big regret now is this show doesn't go for 2 hours, because you also talked about an aspect of Christianity in some of your esotericism. I'm a Christian. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in other interpretations.
Oh no, I'm massively I think, the Christian faith was my operating system. My mum was a born again Christian. I had, the idea of Christos and Christ, and that to me is massively positive. Like people are really good at being negative about that space. For me, that's done far more good in the world than any occult practitioner. Like a little old lady goes to church every week and does what has a connection with the sacred is far more valuable to the universe than most of the people I've met through my work of the occult. They're all just like ego mad lunatics, and they're not truth. So yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm closer to what a Christian is than I am to what a true occultist is in the media. So yeah, it's completely where I'm at.
John,
and
you're
more so
one of my favorite guests ever.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Love you even more. We have to have. I mean, I say this.
I'd love to come back. Yeah,
I love chatting, but
please.
I could have talked to you tonight for 3 hours. Like I'm just going, what questions do I have to punch out in this hour? Because you're just a powerhouse of knowledge and so interesting.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to
just have this energy, and I don't
talk
talk about energy. I never have to another guest, but you do have this fantastic energy. Like I could.
Thank you very much
for hours. So
next time we have to talk about Christian.
Sorry. I'm sorry, you go.
So I was just saying next time we have to talk about Christianity, because I think it's a fascinating subject. Lightships is submitting to festivals. It should be available later on this year. I mean, lightships.info or johnharrigan.com. You can find out more about me and my work. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Well, you were just a fantastic guest. And as I know you will, keep it weird, John.
Yeah, I will, definitely. Take care, guys.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.